Lonely farmer saves Apache woman from brutal whipping. What she did the next day shocked him. He heard a whip crack at sunrise, and by sundown his home was ash. But what the Apache woman brought to his gate the next morning could hang the most feared man in Iron Creek. Before we start, would you have pulled the trigger? Tell me in the comments. And stay till the end for the moment justice finally rides faster than fear. The prairie woke like it always did, slow, gold, and quiet. Ethan Cole, the ghost of Iron Creek, stood on his porch, hand on a worn Winchester. His boots were dust. His eyes were older than his face. He scanned fence lines, pasture, sky. Nothing moved but a hawk tracing a lazy circle. Then the sound came. A shout. Carried thin on the wind. Another. Then the whip. Cruel. Clean. Final. Ethan's breath turned cold. He didn't think. He moved. Hat on. Rifle slung. Saddle leather squealed as he mounted. The gelding surged. Hooves hammered. The world blurred, grass, light, horizon. Ethan kept low, jaw tight, eyes on the bend near the old trading post road. He rounded it and saw hell. A young Apache woman bound to a post. Hair tangled. Wrists raw. A foreman with a hard face, Jed Dalton's man, spun a coiled lash in one fist like a sermon made of leather. A ring of onlookers stood close enough to smell blood, far enough to pretend they weren't part of it. Teach her a lesson, a voice. The lash snapped. Air screamed. Hey! Ethan's voice split the clearing. The foreman turned. The crowd shifted. Ethan's rifle cracked. Dirt spit at the foreman's boots. Untie her, Ethan said. Come. Deadly. The foreman smirked. Not your range, Cole. She's a thief. Tries to run, she pays. He raised the whip. Ethan stepped down from the horse in one smooth motion. The rifle never wavered. Untie her. Silence drew tight. A ranch hand swallowed, then saw something in Ethan's eyes and cut the rope. The woman collapsed, winced, clutched burned wrists. Ethan offered his hand. She hesitated, eyes fierce and unbroken, then took it. Up you go, he murmured. He lifted her into the saddle and swung up behind. The shot came fast, someone in the crowd panicked. It hissed past Ethan's hat. The gelding reared. Ethan fired back, not to kill, but to make the ground dance under their boots. Barrel splintered. Men dove. Hold on, he told her. He kicked hard. They tore across open land as the sun broke clean and bright behind them, laying long shadows like chase lines across the grass. They didn't slow until his fence line rose like a scar across the earth. He helped her down. She stood, back straight, breathing hard through pain, eyes steady. You're safe here, he said. She gave a short nod and, without a word, walked toward the hills. Ethan watched until she became the land itself. He knew it wasn't over. He felt it in the way the wind changed. He'd just drawn a line Jed Dalton would test before dark. He thought the danger ended at the fence. He was wrong. That night would burn his past to the ground. Underscore 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 underscore. The sun climbed. Ethan put the gelding away. Sweat, dust, and adrenaline cut grooves in his face. Inside, the house smelled like stale coffee and clean boards. It had the silence of a place that had learned to live without laughter. He poured, sat, and stared out over the land. Sarah's bread had once cooled on that table. Sarah's laugh had once lived in these walls. Fever took her 3 winters back. On the morning it broke, her hand slipped from his. He had not filled the silence since. A lash at sunrise. A stand in the dust. A woman's eyes like flint. He'd do it again. He knew Dalton. Everybody did. Big brand. Bigger temper. Friends in the saloon. A way of making men feel small. Dalton didn't forget slights. He didn't forgive defiance. He loved a lesson taught loud. Ethan stood. He walked the fence, checked posts, read the ground like a book. Fresh boot prints near the north boundary, too heavy for a drifter. Dalton's boys were already sniffing. He bolted his door that night. Set the rifle within easy reach. Sat in a chair that could see both windows. And Sarah's voice, memory, not ghost, said, "Don't lose the good part, Ethan. Not here. Not now." He looked toward the hills where the woman had gone. If she lived, it would be because he'd said no to a rope. If he paid for that, then he'd pay in full. Outside, a coyote called once and let the night swallow the echo. Underscore 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 underscore. The rooster crowed a thin, tired sound, as if Dawn owed him money. Ethan was already on the porch. The air held dew and promise. And there, just inside the gate, stood the woman. Cleaner now. Hair braided. Wrists welted but proud. She carried a small woven basket like proof of something. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan said. She didn't flinch. "I came to thank you." Her English held music in the vowels. Apache softened the edges. "You don't owe me. I have no people," she said. The weight of that sentence bent nothing in her back. No one left. Ethan's chest tightened. He had known loneliness. He had never named it that clearly. She lifted the basket. Strips of dried meat. A handful of berries. A small carved coyote. "This is all I have. Let me work here. Let me pay my debt." "The smart thing," Ethan said slowly, "is to send you away." She looked past him at the empty windows. "If you send me away, I sleep in the hills. They will find me. They will finish." Ethan swallowed. She was small. She stood like a soldier. "Fine," he said at last. "You can stay. For now." He hated the softness in his voice. He also trusted it. "Sit," he said inside. She obeyed, careful with the basket. He poured coffee for himself, water for her. "If Dalton finds out." "He will," she said. "I am not afraid." He almost smiled. "Almost. You'll help with chores. If I say stay inside, you stay inside." She nodded. "Would you have let her stay?" Say stay or send in the comments, tell me why. Underscore 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 underscore. She moved like she knew what her hands were for. Fed the chickens. Hauled water. Swept the porch until the dust rose and drifted like memory. When she mended a fence post without being asked, Ethan said, "Where'd you learn that?" "My father," she said. "Before." The word closed like a door. He didn't push. "Not yet." "Name?" he asked later, handing her a tin plate. "Nayeli," she said. It fit. A name like a blade that could also be a song. "Ethan," he said, though she already knew. A lone rider dusted a far ridge and kept going. Ethan watched him reduce to a speck and then a story he told someone else in town. "Tomorrow I go for flour and nails," Ethan said. "You stay here. Be careful," she said. It sounded like an order and a prayer. Iron Creek wasn't a big town. It was a loud one. Hammers and gossip and the smell of iron hot enough to taste. Heads turned when Ethan tied his horse at the general store. Some faces were curious. Some were hungry for a fight. "Morning, coal," the storekeep said. "Neutral. Practiced. Flour. Salt. Nails," Ethan said. He stacked it all quiet on the counter. From the corner, "Here you got yourself an Apache girl, coal." Spit hit the tin with a wet clap. "Brave. Might need extra bullets." Ethan laid down coins. "Tell Dalton if he puts a boot on my land again, he leaves on a board." The room cooled. He left with his supplies and his jaw locked. Back at the ranch, Nayeli worked. She didn't ask what they said in town. He didn't tell her the part where the room went dark at her name. He did say, "They know. I told you they would." "We won't run," he said. She looked up. "I am tired of running." They nailed planks across a weak barn door. She sharpened a hatchet. He checked and rechecked ammunition like prayer beads. Dusk laid violet over the grass. They ate little and spoke less. Not awkward. Charged. A storm learning their names. "You don't have to stay," Ethan said at last. She set down the tin cup. Her eyes held the line. "I have run my whole life. Not tonight." "Then we stand together," he said. Outside, a lantern bobbed at the gate. A rider. A test. Ethan blew out the lamp. The house took a breath and disappeared into itself. The lantern outside went dark, too. When the door breaks, someone won't get up again. Who do you think it will be? Underscore 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 underscore. They didn't sleep. Ethan sat at the table with the rifle across his lap. Nayeli kept watch by the window. The fire burned low enough to show faces, not enough to make targets. You stay awake like a wolf, she said softly. A man learns, he said, when trouble keeps his calendar. Why alone? She asked after a long quiet. My wife, he said. Fever. 3 winters back. I am sorry. He nodded once, grief a familiar ache he no longer fought. She looked at the rifle. I know what it is to lose everything. She told him, not with tears, but with a straight voice, soldiers and fire, a railroad line called Progress and a village erased for it. Her mother. Her brother. Names she didn't hand to the night. Dalton there, laughing, paid not to see people as people. I swore I would kill him, she said. A promise turned into air. Under my roof? Ethan asked. If I must. He surprised himself. He reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. You won't do it alone. The wind picked up and rattled the shutters like a warning. They were still holding hands when the knock wasn't a knock at all. It was a boot and a shoulder and a curse. The door bucked and splintered. The first man crashed in. Ethan shot once, clean. The man fell. The room went loud and smoky, all angles and firelight. Find her, a voice. Too close. Dalton kicked the table. Ethan swung the rifle but and felt bone give. Back, he shouted to Nayeli. She crawled to the corner where the shells were. Fingers steady. Load. Pass. Fire. A machine made of 2 people who had decided to be alive. Lantern oil splashed. A flame took it like a gift. The kitchen leaped into orange. Smoke thickened. They couldn't hold the house. They could hold each other. Barn, Ethan said. They moved like they'd practiced in a dream, fast, low, sure. Out the back. Across the yard that used to be safety. Horses wild-eyed and trembling. Reins in hand. Foot in stirrup. They rode into a night that smelled like loss and iron. Behind them, the only home Ethan had left became a column of heat that touched the sky. Don't look, he said. She didn't. The hills took them in like a swallowed breath. Rock closed around them. Mesquite offered thin cover. They dismounted in a narrow cut where the wind got confused and the stars felt closer. They'll follow, Nayeli said. Not tonight, Ethan said. We bought a few hours. She wrapped her arms around herself the way people do when the cold is inside, not out. Everything you built. A house is wood, he said. I can build wood. Silence widened, then narrowed to a point when she took a pouch from her belt. You still do not know why he hunts me. Tell me. She unfolded a paper. Parchment scarred with names and numbers. Ethan held it near a small fire. Dalton's handwriting. Dates. Payments. Families listed by count like cattle in a ledger of sin. God, Ethan said. This hangs a man. Nayeli nodded. He was the guide for soldiers who burned us. He sold women and children to camps. I took this when I escaped. He hunts not for revenge. For silence. We can't take it to the sheriff, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head. He drinks with Dalton on Saturdays. Fort Clay, Ethan said. 20 miles. Open country. If we ride at first light, we can put this in a captain's hand. Nayeli stood. She looked taller in the firelight. I have run for 2 years. I am tired of running. He almost smiled. Then at dawn, we don't run. We ride toward sleep, she said. She took the first watch anyway. Ethan let his body remember how. He woke to a sky washed clean of stars and colored like a bruise healing. They think the ridge will save them. But the ridge is where death waits, or a bugle. Underscore 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 underscore. They killed the fire with dirt. Saddled fast. Hands learned a new speed because the sun was o'clock and Dalton liked early. The plains were market bright with morning. Every shadow looked like a man. Halfway through a dry riverbed, dots appeared on the horizon. The dots grew teeth. They are coming, Nayeli said. Ridge, Ethan said. High ground. They spurred. Hooves tore up old beds of water and memory. A shot whined past Nayeli's ear. She did not duck. She bared her teeth at nothing. They hit the ridge and wheeled. Go, Ethan said. I will not leave you, she said. He didn't argue. He let that sentence be the tether. He fired. A rider fell. Dust turned into a curtain. Dalton rode forward smiling like a man who didn't understand he had already lost his soul. This ends now. Dalton shouted. This ends at the fort, Ethan called. With your ledger on a captain's desk. Dalton's smile broke. Should have burned that book. He charged. The fight narrowed to 1 second that stretched like wire. Bullets, horse screams, grit in the mouth. Ethan's sleeve tore with a graze. Nayeli shot clean, breathing slow. Another rider spun off into emptiness. There were too many. The circle tightened. Then it came, thin, far, impossible, a bugle's call bouncing from stone to sky. Dalton's men faltered. The ridge sprouted cavalry. Blue coats against blue morning. Fall back, someone yelled. Dalton charged anyway. Rage makes men stupid. Ethan waited until the last second and swung the Winchester like an axe. The stock found Dalton's jaw with a crack that rang like a church bell in a town with no church. Dalton hit dirt. The others broke. The soldiers poured over the ridge and made order out of chaos with practiced speed. You two all right? The lieutenant called. Ethan pointed at the body. This one's wanted for more than you know. We have proof. Nayeli pulled the ledger from her pouch and the soldier's eyes hardened. Fort Clay, he said. Now. Underscore 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 underscore. Fort Clay was timber and discipline. Flags in the wind. Mud ruts turned to lines under boots. People watched as Dalton was dragged in with his wrists tied and his jaw swollen. Some cheered in their throats. Some took bets in their eyes. Captain Whitmore met them at the gate. Broad shoulders. A face that had learned to be fair because the world wasn't. Lieutenant says this can't wait. It can't, Ethan said. His voice carried without needing to rise. This man sells human lives. Dalton spat blood and words. Lies. Farmer and his wild. Enough, Whitmore snapped. Nayeli stepped forward and handed over the ledger. No flourish. Just truth. Whitmore read. His mouth set. Names. Dates. Payments. Soldiers. He looked up. Bring him to the holding block. We convene at once. The inquiry room was long, high-ceilinged, and full of maps. Lamps flared. Men sat straighter than usual. Ethan went first. He made his words short and solid. Road. Post. Lash. Rifle. Fire. Ridge. Bugle. Ledger. He didn't decorate the truth. He nailed it to the table. Then Nayeli stood. She spoke of a village erased for a line of rail that didn't even arrive. Of a mother's hand slipping away in smoke. Of a brother's laugh she refused to describe because some sounds are a last inheritance. Of Dalton, smiling, counting. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. Men who thought they were made of iron found out they were made of water. Whitmore turned to Dalton. Do you have anything to say? Dalton had nothing. Rage broke the mask and showed nothing useful underneath. By authority of the United States Army, Whitmore said, you are under arrest for murder, kidnapping, and unlawful trade. Sentence at dawn. The room exhaled. The fort turned its head and listened to a new story. That evening, Ethan found Nayeli at a window. The sun threw long bars of orange over the yard. It's done, he said. It is a beginning, she said. Her eyes were not softer. They were deeper. For my people, there is more. Ethan nodded. My ranch is gone. But hands still work. I could use yours. If you'd want to build something worth staying for. You ask me to stay? I ask you to help me build a place that deserves us. She took his hand. Not as thanks. As promise. Type justice if you felt that testimony. I read all of them. Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks later, the valley looked like a prayer answered in lumber and sweat. Charred beams were hauled away. New timbers stood. A frame took shape against a sky so wide it made people honest. Every hammer blow sounded like a vow not to disappear. Ethan worked shirtless in heat. Dust streaked his back like war paint. Nayeli wore calico and work trousers, hair braided tight, hands calloused and sure. She stacked logs with a rhythm that didn't ask for praise. You build fast, she said, a smile like a secret. Good reason, he said. What reason? Home isn't wood, he said, it's who's inside the wood. Color rose to her cheeks. She looked away. Smiled anyway. They learned a new silence. Not the empty kind. The full kind. The kind that holds shared water breaks and a glance that says hand me the 10-penny nails without words. Sometimes a shadow in the grass looked like a rider and set their hearts racing. Sometimes it was only antelope rolling the horizon like a tide. Still jumpy? Ethan asked gently. Less every day. He reached out and took her hand, rough palm to rough palm. Dalton's gone. The rest scattered. You're safe here. Safe is not forever, she said. No, he said. But it's a start. They set a ridge beam together. He steadied the ladder. She balanced high, sure-footed. The beam settled. The frame became a house. The house felt, for the first time, like it might deserve to stand. That evening, the sunset painted every nail head gold. The valley held them like a bowl. Think the danger's over? One last score still breathes in the tall grass. The last of Dalton's men who didn't know when to quit, rode like they could change a verdict already spoken. 3 of them. Thin-eyed. Hungry in the wrong way. Ethan saw the dust first. Nayeli brought the rifle. They didn't run. They didn't go inside. They stood at the new porch that wasn't a porch yet. The riders slowed. One raised an empty hand. We don't want trouble. You brought it, Ethan said. Ledger got friends' names in it, the man said. Names that don't want daylight. Then they shouldn't have done those things under night, Nayeli said. The men looked at her like a problem they didn't know the math for. One reached for his holster. Don't, Ethan said. Standoff. Air thickened. A hawk drew a slow, circling question mark above them. The man's fingers twitched. Nayeli's voice cut clean. Blink and you bleed. He froze. Something in her eyes, something he had only seen in other men's nightmares, made him understand. Ride, Ethan said. Tell whoever's left there's no more dark here. They rode. Not fast. Fast looks like fear. They rode at the speed of men who had just remembered they were mortal. Nayeli lowered the rifle and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Ethan touched the small of her back. Not possession. Presence. It is not over, she said. It's over enough, he said. Underscore 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 underscore. A courier from Fort Clay arrived 2 weeks later with a letter sealed in red. Captain Whitmore's hand, clear, clipped, careful. To Mr. Ethan Cole and Ms. Nayeli. The inquiry produced additional arrests. The ledger has led to 2 officers court-martialed. A federal judge rides in 3 weeks to formalize charges and testimonies. If you're willing, your presence will complete the record. The department requests copies of Ms. Nayeli's account for territorial archives. Payment for damages to your property will be considered under emergency relief. Respectfully, Captain J. Whitmore. Nayeli read it twice. A life turned into record. Pain turned into evidence. She folded it slow and precise. Your voice in their archive, Ethan said. Not as a story they tell about you. As a story you tell about yourself. Nayeli's eyes shone without falling. My mother's name will live longer than smoke. We'll ride in, Ethan said. We'll say it again. For the ones who can't. They hung the door on new hinges. It opened smooth and quiet, like a promise kept. Ethan carved Sarah's name into a beam above the kitchen and left space beside it. He didn't say for whom. He didn't have to. Nayeli set the small carved coyote on the mantel. The house decided then to become a home. The first loaf of bread since Sarah cooled on a plank. The smell found corners grief had rented and asked them to move along. They ate with their hands and laughed, awkward at first, then free. At dusk, they sat on the step that would soon be a porch. The valley breathed. A storm crawled the far range, flashing heat lightning with no sound, like heaven practicing. Ethan said, You ever think about leaving? Nayeli said, I did nothing else for 2 years. Now I think about staying. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Tomorrow, he said, we set shingles. Tomorrow, she said, we plant seeds. They looked at each other like the next year had already started. What's one thing you'd build first after losing everything? Comment, walls, or garden, I'm curious. Underscore 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 underscore. Iron Creek learned to say Nayeli's name without spitting. Not everyone. Enough. Fort Clay wrote her testimony into a book other captains would read. 2 officers wore chains they used to command. Jed Dalton swung at dawn and the sun rose anyway. Ethan's new house kept out rain better than the last. It kept in laughter, too. Sometimes silence returned, but it was the good kind, the kind that means we're tired and safe and together. On the first clear spring, Nayeli laid corn in the furrows. Ethan followed with water. A hawk wrote slow blessings over the field. Justice was served, Ethan said. But it wasn't the end. It never is, Nayeli said. It is a door. They walked through it. If you were Ethan that morning, do you pull the trigger? Tell me below. Hit like if courage beats fear in your book, subscribe for more frontier stories where truth rides in daylight, and share this with someone who needs to believe that beginnings can rise from ashes. Title: He saved an Apache woman at dawn. By nightfall, his world was on fire. Lonely farmer versus the most feared man in Iron Creek, true frontier justice. The whip cracked at sunrise, what she brought next day shocked him. A lonely farmer risks everything to stop a brutal whipping, and uncovers a ledger that could hang the most feared man in Iron Creek. Based on frontier-era accounts and dramatized for a modern audience, this story follows Ethan and Nayeli from rescue to justice to rebuilding a life worth living. Stay to the end for the verdict at Fort Clay and the moment a burned home becomes a new beginning. Keywords: inline frontier justice, true West story, Apache woman, outlaw foreman, ranch attack, Fort Clay inquiry, Western drama, emotional storytelling, redemption arc, rebuilding after loss.